Hi, welcome to Common Creek Homestead. Today we are going to make a potato garden. If you look over here, you'll see my sister doing, pulling up weeds, and I am helping turn and twist the soil. So please watch as we make some potatoes.
Hi everyone, as Helen has said, we are planting potatoes. I have never grown potatoes before, and so this was a brand new experience for me. Originally, I had planned to put this out in the field. We just had a neighbor come and disc a large space for us for a pumpkin patch, and so I was going to borrow some of it for potatoes. But then I remembered that we inherited these amazing garden boxes from the previous owners, and they had tomatoes and peppers and several herbs like chamomile and I think peppermint growing in here. So we just busied ourselves with the first task of getting all the weeds out from last season and removing some tomato cages. And here you can see that Helen is tilling up the soil. So I am very interested and intrigued by the no-till method. That is the permaculture idea that soil is a living, breathing thing, and it does not necessarily need to be disturbed. However, this soil has been sitting here for a while, and as I began to pull weeds, I saw a lot of grubs. Now, when I see grubs in the garden, I know that they are going to interfere greatly with the roots of my plants, with the leaves of my plants. So tilling the soil over from an old, tired garden bed is going to expose them to the surface where the birds are going to notice them and eat them all gone. So whatever we did not see and grab out of this garden bed, I have high hopes that birds are going to come and make quick work of these nasty little grubbers. Everything that I learned in this process, I learned from M.I. Gardner. He's a Michigan gardener, extremely popular on YouTube and other social media platforms, and he's my number one guy when it comes to learning how to grow vegetables. So I took all of his advice on how to grow these. The spacing on these is about 6 inches in between our potatoes, and he has tried the method where you cut the potato in half or you leave it whole. So I left mine whole like he did. I am not a potato expert like he is, and so this is not necessarily advice coming from me, as I have none to give. So I would go and check out a few of my other vegetable gardeners like M.I. Gardner and Epic Gardener. They really raise a lot of crops in a small area, and I'm totally inspired by everything that they're able to do. So we spaced them evenly like this in our rows, and I added a granular fertilizer, and then simply on top of that granular fertilizer we added compost. Now, plants will uptake nutrients out of the soil through their roots, and after a short period of time they are deficient in nutrients because they're eaten. So plants require food in order to perform, and so what we're doing is just restoring nutrients back into the soil. And so with the compost and with the granular fertilizer, that is what we're doing. This is great soil that we're working in, and it looks like it is nutrient dense. It's very dark in color, and there is clay soil underneath it. And I work in a landscape company. I love red clay, and that's a surprising thing for most of our customers to hear. But in future videos, as planting season, as we get more in the full swing of planting season, I want to discuss why I love our red clay. And so just because you see black soil does not necessarily mean that it is superior to red clay. It's easier to work in for sure, but we'll talk about more of that later. So we actually planted 4 different varieties of potatoes. We planted some blue potatoes, some Yukon Golds, some, I think they were purple potatoes, and red potatoes. We just picked this up at our local seed store, and a lot of them had several eyes on them. Now, you can divide your potato. I chose not to, just because it was simpler to do it this way, and I don't really know what I'm doing, so I want to start easily, and then as the years go on and I gain more experience, I'll branch out with my experimenting. Now, here's something that we did because we didn't want to keep stepping on the rows that we had just planted. I do know that root vegetables like your carrots, your potatoes, your radishes, beets, and things of that nature, they really prefer loose soil to work in. And so if you step on your gardening area, you're compacting that soil back down in, and it can make it difficult for its growing situation. So instead of stepping on the soil, we put a plank across our tiny raised garden bed right there and walked across that instead. That didn't always work, but that's okay. I really enjoyed this project with my kids. As moms and dads and other guardians know, it is easier to get things done when you're alone. But I gotta tell you, the precious conversations that we had, just the fun of enjoying each other's company while we were laboring together for a common goal, this was really sweet and sincere. And as I was editing this video, I would turn up the volume of the original video just to hear their sweet little voices. And of course, sometimes it's just silly talk. But this reminds me of when I was really young. I don't know if you have caught some of our previous videos, but I was adopted when I was 9 years old. And one of the first things that my mom and I did together at the first house that we lived in was to plant a garden together. And I remember we had watermelons and we had peppers, and boy, those peppers were so spicy. We called them jalapenos instead of jalapenos. But goodness, bonding was difficult as an adopted child, and I felt very failed by all the adults previously in my life. But we bonded together over gardening, and I truly believe it was that first little garden that my mom and I tried together that sparked a love of getting in the soil and growing things. Now, when we moved to this property, I'm going to explain this machine I'm trying to use, or this I feel so silly, but man, this was left at our home when we moved in here. It's obviously an antique plow, and it's so pretty, but when I went to move it to a better spot, I noticed that it really rolls on its wheel, and I was like, man, maybe I can restore this thing. But when we were digging up these beds, I wanted to see, will this really till up a hole? Will this really plow a line for me? And it did. And it wasn't easy, but it was still fun to try it. Altogether, I think we planted 4 bags of potatoes. I have no idea how many hundreds of pounds of potatoes this will yield, but I'm excited to at least try it. Now, we do have one difficulty coming our way. We do have a lot of deer on our property. We can see their feet print everywhere, and they happen to love the greens of the potato plant and the sweet potato plant. So I think that's why this wire is here in front of this garden space. I think that our previous owners of this property were trying to keep deer away from their tomatoes and their peppers, and this was a bed full of chamomile right here, which I imagine deer might like. So we are going to be on the lookout, and hopefully we can deter the deer enough, either with fencing or with smells or force with electric fencing. But I would sure hate to see a lot of hard work get lost to the deer. My goal is not to feed the wildlife this year. My goal is to feed our family, and potatoes, one of the best foods God ever invented. Yeah, so hopefully we can keep the deer at bay and enjoy a lot of crops. We do have some ideas. We've got some tricks up our sleeves for the deer, and we're going to be talking about that in a separate video, just whether we try it manually or with smells or with force. But here we are on the very last row of putting our potatoes in, and this was just such a fun time. Now, you'll notice that I only have 3 of my 4 kids present for this. There are some things that my kids are obligated to do. We do carry the burden of chores together as a family. There's not one single person that is responsible for those things. That's too difficult for a working farm, a working homestead. And I also don't like children that grow up without responsibilities. I think I think they make very subpar adults. And so I want to instill this in my kids, but I also don't want to burn them out. My oldest wanted to go to the museum today when we were planting these potatoes with her grandmother. So that was something that was just totally okay with me. because she's not getting out of chores. It just sounded a lot more interesting to go learn about wildcats at the museum. That's one of the things that we're doing to try to keep healthy, thriving children on our homestead, is trying to keep the chores light and happy and give them what they're capable of. So that is all for today's video. We can't wait to see how this potato bed progresses. We will keep you guys posted, and that is all for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.